You're listening to Selling the Dream. This isn't an interview, and we're not journalists, but each week we'll ask our guests to open up and share their secrets to business success. Let's have a conversation and have some fun.
Hey everybody, welcome to Selling the Dream, a podcast for people who are incredibly bored and have nothing else better to do but to sit around and listen to a bunch of people talking about success, talking about leadership, talking about entrepreneurship, sales. As always, joined by my good friend Joe Iredell from Carlsbad, coming to us live from Carlsbad, California. Originally a Delco boy. Joe, how are you? What's new? What's
Good,
up?
man. Good. I think that description is basically every podcast, right? Just bored people listening to other people talk about stuff.
I guess it's better than sports radio, in my opinion. Like that's when I listen to them
I
in the
can't listen
car.
to that. You know, I can't listen to sports radio. I've
Yeah.
become disenchanted with sports in general. Other than the Eagles, man, just everybody talk about other guys doing stuff. I don't know, man. Not into it anymore.
I just think it's all just like most media. It's designed to get people worked up, and it has very little basis in truth, and more of it's all just sensationalization, And it goes for the important media and the sports media as well. So I listen to podcasts, I listen to dopes and what they have to say about things, and sometimes I learn something, Sometimes I don't, So hopefully people learn something with this podcast, though.
Let's talk more action, bro.
That's right.
That's what I'm about.
All right, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to hang up. And no, I'm kidding. Let's talk, man. Let's talk.
Let's get out there. Let's go get it.
We have an awesome show today. So our guest today, I have been eager to have him join us for a while, and someone who I don't know if he even remembers, but one of the very first people I met in the mortgage business. And I'll share that story here after the introduction. But before we go any further, I want to introduce the one and only Al Perry from Century 21 Advantage Gold, but more importantly, a leader, a thoughtful author, and Facebook guru. I look forward to his posts and every single day, and a long time industry veteran and associate. Al, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Hey, I appreciate being here. Good meeting you guys. Meeting Joe, and Ken, getting to see you again. Always good to collaborate with good people.
So do you know the story that you were one of the first people that I met in the industry, and do you remember when?
I remember meeting you a long time ago through Mason,
Yes.
Iredell, and I think he was, if I recall, and I could have this incorrect, but I want to say the ink on your business card was probably not dry yet, and he brought you around to the office just to introduce you, and had an opportunity to meet you. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I don't know how long you've been in the mortgage business. I know you've been in the business a while now, but I'd have to say that was probably, is that maybe 2004, 2005? Is that about right?
I think it was 2002 is when we got in. The Partners Group Financial, I'm sure you remember, right?
Yes,
my first company. And yeah, so I was shadowing Mason, the legendary Mason Iredell, who rest in peace. We lost him this year. And Mason, just taking me around like I'm just a little monkey getting dragged around by the big monkey, showing me where the ropes and who to talk to, and yeah, we were down at your South Philly office, and he introduced me to you, yeah, man, that was a long time ago. I can't believe how long, how long all of us, and Joe and I were just talking today about, we've been around the block now, man.
Somebody asked me this morning, they're like, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, holy crap, 25 years.
25.
That's 25 years now. Like, quarter of a century.
And still learning every single freaking
I know.
day. It's the crazy
part. Like it's the first week.
It is kind of surreal because I still kind of identify as the new guy in the room. and maybe it's that white belt mentality, that we like to have. Try to surround yourself with folks who know more than you do, and as time goes and as you learn more and you become the person with a lot of the wisdom, sometimes it's a little more difficult because people start looking to you to be that person, where you're the mover and shaker, or you're the person who's supposed to know everything. But if you let that get to your head and you don't continue to surround yourself with folks who inspire you and help you grow in different aspects of your business. And that's why I think I still look at myself like the rookie. So it's hard to think of myself. It's 29 years. It'll be 30 years, come 2026 for me. And then I grew up in a real estate office. My mother was in real estate since 1977. I was 6 years old. My father passed. He was the breadwinner in the family. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. She was a legal secretary prior to having kids, but took them a while to have kids. So, they had put a couple bucks away, and he was kind of coming up through the stock exchange and getting a few promotions. So she became a stay-at-home mom, and so for my 6 years, my brother was a newborn, and then my father passed away suddenly, and she didn't have any savings. They didn't have any. They had no cushion. They weren't planning on that. So she decided she wanted to go back to being a legal secretary because that was going to be a very rigid job. She worked for defense, for folks, criminal attorneys, and so there was a lot of preparation, a lot of deadline stuff. So she got in an easy job, real estate, where there's very flexible schedule and
Make your own schedule, be your own boss.
unlimited earning potential. Isn't that what they promise us in this business? Yeah. So, but she was still able to be a lunch mother at school. Something that I was in first grade, something that she had signed up for. She was still able to do the school trips with me. To go to Washington D.C. or wherever we were going off to, and she was still able to prioritize her schedule and do some of the stuff that she may have had to. Had things been different for her, she would have had the opportunity to do as a stay-at-home mom, but she wasn't willing to compromise, certain components of that. So real estate offered her that. But my brother, my grandmother moved in with us, and she would be able to watch my brother, because he was so young at the time. But my mother would pick me up for school, and off to the real estate office I went. Pretty much, that was my evolution. I'd be the kid doing the homework at the desk at the real estate office that an agent should have been in, but was didn't show up to prospect. So I got to use the unused desk doing my homework. So yeah, when I really think about it, I've been in a real estate office probably more like 47 years, let alone 30. The first 17 years, it was almost like I was an apprentice.
And you still feel like you're the new guy. I love that analogy. And I've always said, like, up until a couple of years ago, I really feel like it was a couple of years ago. I'm 47 now. I was the youngest loan officer I knew for a while. For a long time, I was the youngest. Now there's some young guys out there, and and younger than me anyway, and they're doing pretty good. But yeah, it was a weird experience to realize, like you said, like you have. I do this every time out. I'm going to put a pin in that, right? If you like that phrase, I hate that phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. I'm going to come back to that in a second. First, before we go any further, I forgot about the 2 truths and a lie. I always forget about the 2 truths and a lie. So I'm gonna go with the 2 truths and a lie. Then we'll get back to being the young guy and seeking where, as you get older, where you're going to find your wisdom, your inspiration. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But 2 truths and a lie. Give me 3 facts. 2 of them are true. 1 of them's a lie.
All right.
And we're going to try and figure out by the end. Maybe you'll drop a few hints without knowing it.
Okay. I'm going to stay in the music lane for 2 truths and a lie, because the real estate lane would be too obvious. So 2 truths and a lie. I can name all the members of the Village People. And when I say I can name all the members of the Village People, I mean not the cop and the Indian.
Not by occupation.
Their actual names. Their actual names, and you can Google check this.
All right. I don't feel like that's not the lie.
So that's
I
one.
want to live with that. We'll see.
That is way too specific.
So too specific, right? Two that I've seen Barry Manilow in concert 7 times, only once with my wife or a girl. All the other times with guys, my buddies. And then the third one is that I've hung out with and partied with the Sugar Hill Gang and Grandmaster Melly Mel after hours at the Lagoon in Delco. On the party bus, so on the tour bus. So those are my three. One of those is not. One of those is not accurate.
Holy moly!
One of those is
I'm going to
old.
say this right now. So far, those are the three best answers we've been given. I don't know which one's the lie, but hands down, those are the
I
three.
hope they're all true.
Yeah.
I just hope every one of those is true.
Um, I want to go back to something you said, which I'm experiencing myself, and what I love about this platform for me, and I know Joe and I have shared this before as well, is like it's as much about us and learning from people and having these conversations. Like it's so selfish, seemingly to me. Like, hey, I'm just going to ask questions that are going to help me, and hopefully other people hear it and it helps them. But as you get older, talk about Mason, my other mentor, good friend John Conis, who had passed away this year as well. You know,
another
that
good,
room
another
of
good guy.
people that you can go to and turn to for advice, for help, for perspective, for wisdom, that population has shrunk. And now here we are in our 40s and early 50s. Like, where do you go now, Al? Your mom, who I know was a wealth of knowledge in the industry and a titan, to be honest, in the industry, somebody that I'm sure you leaned on. Like, who do you lean on now for that kind of stuff?
Well, I was pretty lucky early on. Even my mother, she pushed me out of the nest. We worked together. She passed away in 2020, and we worked together during all those years. But she really wanted me to get perspective beyond what she could provide. And even though she was a treasure chest of wisdom and was always there when I needed a guiding hand, we also had some friction. I mean, we respected each other, but we were built differently in certain ways, and so we would butt heads in a respectful way. But I also think that my mother at times could say, "Hey, the elixir that you need to solve your problem is over there," and I would sometimes fight her on that because sometimes you want to take your own path.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the elixir that you need
Well,
to
not the
solve?
elixir. The elixir is the wrong thing. The antidote to what is probably the better word. The antidote to what ails you is right here.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would need to experience that myself. So I certainly learned a ton from her, but she was also the person I think that would grow most frustrated with me, as she would try to mentor me, and then we had different ways. My mother would go on a listing appointment, and she'd be on that listing appointment for 4 or 5 hours sometimes, and she'd come back and she would know the folks' life story. And it's something I've actually, as I go back and kind of unpack my mother and who she was. One of the things that is most endearing of her, like her client base, even folks she didn't know very well at the beginning of their relationships, would become dear, dear friends. And you see this in real estate often. You see it in mortgage often, because you kind of go through the trials and tribulations of of what is an emotional journey for many. But my mother would come home from listing appointments and she would know, who had a child that passed away, whose husband was an
But
alcoholic.
you would remember all this.
Oh, she knew all that. She was such a caring person, that those folks would see the genuine character in her, and they would open up to her. And it wasn't a sales technique. For some people that are in real estate or in sales in general, they use that connection as a sales technique. It's like a design. Like, it's not that they're trying to do harm with it. They're just trying to, if you can put your guard down and open up to me, maybe we can help you better accomplish your goals. But so many times when people talk to a salesperson, they got their guard up. It's, hey, he's in sales, he's commission based. I
What
got
kind
Yeah,
of
it's like
hoop contests do you
it's
try to
just
play?
genuine. It's just
yeah.
genuine. You're like trying to break them down,
But
basically.
my mother would be like the most loyal and caring person, and she would go and she would get walked on a lot. I mean, quite frankly, not everybody would treat her with the respect that she would treat them. And so that was one of the points of friction for me. Wasn't that she was such a kind and caring and loyal person. I love that. I identified with that. I followed that lead. It was that when the road wasn't, when it became apparent that the other people didn't see the relationship in the same way, she was like a glutton for punishment. She would just go back and and take the beating, so to speak, the emotional beating, and that would drive me crazy, and so sometimes I would come at things and I would just need to get. So she would want me to get different perspectives at a very early stage. So like when the ink wasn't dry on my license, she signed. She was like, okay, I was like, okay, what do I do? I showed up for work the first day. She said, I want you to sign up for Alan Dom's advanced sales class over at Temple Real Estate Institute. And I didn't know who Alan was at the time,
Another
but
Titan.
yeah, so Alan's been a great mentor in my career. We've never worked directly together, for the same firm or anything. But real estate's a cooperative business, and maybe that's a little bit that we've gotten away from in more recent years is the spirit of cooperation. But it's always been a cooperative business, and there's great people that are attracted. I mean, there's some knuckleheads in this business, but there's great people that are attracted to this business. And if you have your eyes open and you're willing to learn, there are folks you can learn from. And Alan was always one of those guys. So I signed up for his class. And what was interesting was, those classes were for broker credits, which was ironic because I barely had real estate agent credits at the time. But everybody in that class, nobody was there specifically for the broker's credits. They were there because Alan was teaching it, and
Because it was him, right? He was
he
the
was
one
a
talking.
titan. He was a guy. NAR used to have they had their realtor magazine they would circulate. He was on the cover of the magazine. I think the previous year. For just his general production levels, like amazing production levels and the niche market that he had defined. So I signed up for the class. I went in, and everybody in the class was a heavy hitter, but me. I was the only person in the class. I think I had like one or two sales under my belt at the time. And
Do you
so,
remember meeting people in that class
oh,
that you still talk to today?
yeah, the 100%. Kathy Conway was in that class. And Kathy was, with Prudential Fox and Roach for years, Berkshire Hathaway. Our son Pat Conway's was there. They have, there was other folks there were folks from was folks from Maryland, folks from uh, Delaware, New Jersey, because Alan was always pretty big at the shore. He owned real estate down the shore, so he knew a lot of the real estate brokers down there. So it was folks that didn't even have a Pennsylvania license. They just wanted, because good habits and good routines they don't know state lines. Real estate law might know state lines,
That's a
but
good point.
yeah, good habits and good routines. So these people were in the class, and so here I was, in the class. So it was from day one. There were people like him, and then Alan said, "Hey, here's what I want you to do." He loved it. He knew my mother. They had served on a professional standards committee together when Alan was president of the Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors. My mother served, and she did something on an anti-graffiti campaign that the realtors used to have back then. And so Alan would speak highly of his relationship with my mother. So he loved the fact that I was the white belt in the room learning, and that I was networking with all these other people in the class. And then his whole class was one of the backdrops of his class was that he would highlight. I don't know if you remember the Howard Britton cassette tapes you used to get, the Star Makers program, or Star.
Like that was in Amway, not in real
Yeah,
estate, but it's the same thing.
Star Power program. They would mail you out the cassette tapes or the DVDs, or CDs, I should say, and it was always Howard Britton, and he would be interviewing You know,
top
his
realtors.
and one of Howard's great lines was, you know, get out of judgment and get into curiosity. And so he would, in order to be interviewed by him, you had to do like 20 million. I mean, this is back in the 90s. You know, it was 96 or 96, I think, when I signed up for his class. So you were doing 20 million in 96 plus. I think that was the threshold. Maybe it was 25 million to get interviewed by him. But he would have people who did REOs. He would have people that did luxury housing. He'd have people like, you know, who did nothing but condo. And everyone seemed to have kind of different niches that they kind of focused on. But, you know, I just started surrounding myself with that type of information, maybe not even those people specifically, but that type of information that I would try to put myself into. So that's what I was listening to in my car. You know,
Yeah.
you talk about sports talk radio.
Yeah, it was before podcasts. You had cassettes,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
I listened to I used to listen when I was in college and when I was in high school. I
Al,
would
where'd you go to college, real quick?
Temple. I
Temple.
went to Philadelphia Textile and Science right out of high school. Went to West Catholic High School and Philadelphia College Textile and Science up on Henry Avenue. What's at Jefferson University now, freshman and sophomore year, and then 4 years at Temple University. I transferred, was on the 6 year program because I bartended full time.
Yeah, Temple's cool. It's where all the kids that couldn't get into Penn State went. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah, that's
Just kidding. Just kidding.
my,
So, so,
my brother would love that. He's the Penn State alum.
Uh,
so you're listening to these tapes, and that's kind of where you're finding at a young age, you're realizing, hey, I can gain wisdom as long as my eyes are open to the opportunity, I can gain wisdom in all these places. And you know, you feel like as you get older, you feel like that's still serving you today.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And the other thing Alan said was, you know, sign up for a committee over at the Board of Realtors. I want you to get networking over at the Board of Realtors. So I signed up for the education committee. You know, I met the executive officer. Her name was Jerry Cook over at the Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors. Said Alan Dom sent me, told me I should sign up for a committee. They had a spot on the education committee at the time, and they put me in there. I got to meet John Orange. He was the chair of the committee. Orange Brothers, real estate. John's a developer, you know, real estate instructor. He teaches down at Temple, Temple Real Estate Institute. Got to network with him. Met so many people. Louise D'Alessandro was one of the past presidents. She's a partner, broker of record over at Alphonse Masahicken Realtors. You know, very active in the board. You know, got to network with her. Met my now partner, Ann Rubin, and Bill Lublin. They weren't partners back then, but they were past presidents of the Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors. Well, Bill was a past president. Ann was coming up through the line. You know, those folks ended up becoming partnerships that I entered into down the road as I got to know the integrity and the character of the people. You know, and so I did a lot of networking within the board. Got to meet guys like Mike McCann, who was on the board of directors. You know, he was somebody that was, you know, producing at a really high level. You know, getting into rooms where the movers and shakers were, and you know, there's also other people in those rooms too. You know, and sometimes they have short shelf lives in those rooms. You know, any room that you get in on committees and stuff, sometimes you'd find, you know, there was someone else who just signed up for it and they were kind of going through the motions. And that can be a little frustrating in association work because you're like, what are we doing here? You know, because I don't really have time to waste, but I want to do good things. I want to leave a good imprint. I want to help the industry evolve, help the professionalism evolve, but also help influence the industry that we serve. You know, we're always advocating for, you know, private property rights through the Board of Realtors. So you'll find titans of real estate in the Association of Realtors. So I got involved back then, and some of those relationships, Lindsey Johnson, broker of Common Ground Real Estate, Frank Giacovini and I work together now. For Bill Festa, these are all competitors of mine. We were competitive. We could be on a listing appointment competing against each other, but we had these organic friendships that grew through our association work, and I got to pick their brains.
I think part of it, Al, just knowing what I know about you, you know, from afar, you know, your commitment to contribution, you know, that took you, you know, you're learning this, like seeing all these people giving their time and their talent and their energy to the industry that you obviously love, you know, and that drew you to become, you were the GPAR president yourself, right?
Yeah,
What years
yeah.
did you serve as GPAR president?
So 2005, I served my first term as president of Greater Philadelphia. And at the time, Alan Dom and I were the two youngest presidents of the Greater Philadelphia Association. We were separated by a couple months. That was always our running joke. He said, "I should never, never put you in touch with the board, because I forget who was a few months older. Maybe he was a few months younger than me, or I was a
When
few
he
months
became president.
when he became president. So
Yeah.
obviously, he's older than me, presently, but in his year as president. So it didn't really matter because a few years later, Heather Patrone, who's with Berkshire Hathaway now, she became president. She was younger than both of us. So Heather, Heather is the undisputed champion of the youngest president at this point. But that was great. And then they asked me to serve again in 2009. There was an opening because someone had to step off of the line because of a personal issue that they had to deal with, and that created a vacancy. And so that, if anyone who's involved in association work, what normally happens is you don't just become president. Normally, you serve in an entry level. Normally you serve on
On a committee.
you serve on committees or you do something. You do something, and usually, you might get an invite to be on the board of directors, a little bit larger of a body than, but that's the governing body of the association. And then, depending on your work, you don't have to evolve from there. A lot of people just stay board of director level. That's the level of contribution they want to make, but they're always looking to build their leadership team, usually off of their board of directors. So they say if they see something in you that they think you'd be a good representative of the industry. Because when I'm going out to represent Philadelphia Realtors, I'm representing all the realtors as president. So it's a huge burden, because you're carrying the water for many good people in our industry who do what it is we do for
And
many
you're trying
people.
to maintain a real business at the same time. You know what I mean? Like the
Exactly.
amount of volunteer, the amount of time that you're giving to the community at the same time, trying to continue to maintain your own level of production is a
Yeah.
challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And one of the good things, and you'll hear that a lot with association work, but one of the great things I've learned with association work is it doesn't fall on me. I mean, it does fall on you. You got to bring something to the table. But when an association is working well, it's working well because of the collaboration of many. So even when I was president of the board, it wasn't like I was making the decisions. I had to go to all the meetings. I had to do all the stuff. Truthfully, that was done at the granular level. That was done in many points by professional staff. That was done by many volunteers that serve on the committee levels or for task force or people that were in think tanks that would help set the direction. That was done by a strategic plan that the association had. You just get to be kind of the mouthpiece of the organization. It's a very important job, but it's not a job where you have to be all, and be in all the meetings
Yeah.
and do all the stuff. A lot of a lot of that kind of gets identified with you, but really it's the granular work of many. Really who I identify with in association work is the worker bee. That's always what I always wanted to be. I never wanted to be president of my local association. And
Well, you know what they say, Al, some people have greatness thrust upon them, right?
oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But so yeah, so when I got asked to do a second term, it was really cool because you usually you do treasurer, then you do vice president, then you do president elect, and then you do president. So usually your path up to president is a 3, 4, 5 year journey, depending on the association work, and each one is an election of your peers. So if you might, just because you're vice president don't mean you'll be voted to president elect,
Sure.
because your body of work might not have warranted that, or your business, or you might say, hey, look, this was great. I got to take a step back. I'm not able to make the commitment to go to the next pace. So that's, but doing that's a number of year journey. So doing that twice was kind of really cool. I didn't have to go through all the chairs the second time. I got to get fast tracked because they pulled me in off of the past president, group and said, we need to plug you in at president elect for the
Yeah, you
vacancy.
already had your sea legs under. You already did it once before. You
Exactly.
didn't have to make new relationships and do all that stuff.
But
Um,
Greater Philadelphia has 3,000, almost 3,000 members, and so that's a lot of realtors that you're speaking on behalf of. And then
yeah.
in 2023, I got to serve as president of Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, 38,000 realtors.
You were the president of Pennsylvania Association of Realtors?
Pennsylvania, yeah, yeah. So when you serve at the local level, so when I was president elect back in 2004 of my local, the state board of directors is made up of local appointees. So Greater Philadelphia, based on the size of your board locally, they'll say, okay, I forget what the formula is, but maybe it's for like every 150 members that the local association has, the realtor members, primary realtor members, you might get one appointment to the state board.
Yeah.
So the local gets to pick who's going to be our representative at the state. So of course you get the president elect and president. You're most definitely going to be one of the appointments that the local
So
sends
for
up.
so for anybody listening that wants to become president of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, I'll just laid out the blueprint for you.
Yeah,
I hope you appreciate that.
yeah, that's what
Now,
you
I
do. You
want to
want
switch
to work
gears
with
if it's cool. I want to talk a little bit about, and again, one of the things that I found that really attracted me to you is, social media is a place where so much toxicity. It's become people call it the necessary evil. People hate it, but they do it anyway. Some people are on Facebook, but they have aliases so that nobody knows who they really are. This is one guy, Kevin Johnson, who's constantly liking my stuff, and it's,
I heard that. I heard he's a really good dude, though.
that's what I heard, but whatever.
A little
But
creepy, but he's cool.
a little creepy, right? No Facebook profile is always a bad sign. Anyway, looking at like your writing on social media and that platform that you chose. First of all, your writing style is terrific, and I enjoy these long form, thoughtful posts. When did that start? And tell me a little bit about that as far as why you find it important and to engage in that kind of stuff.
So it didn't start with real estate. I joined social media. I think it was 2009. I got my Facebook. I didn't have I never had a MySpace. I wasn't that early an adopter, but I did. I think I joined in 2008 or nine, and I made the decision pretty early on that if I was going to be putting anything on social media, that it would be something positive and uplifting. Uh, I'm not an eternal optimist. A lot of people think I am based on some of the stuff I might share.
Well, you've been doing a lot of work on yourself, which is
Yeah.
a big part of it.
Yeah, and that's actually where it came from. And I would just do the occasional shares, and I didn't really do the long form stuff unless I really had something I wanted to speak about. There are a few posts that'll come up, in my memories that I'll be like, "Wow, I remember writing that," and it was a long form post, but it was just kind of a one off on something I felt passionate about. But I started doing, I guess it was around 2016 or 17. I started journaling, and it was really it had nothing to do with social media, just a personal journal. And I started journaling about mental health. I was seeing a mental health professional for from 2012 through 2019, just for some deep rooted stuff that kind of bubbled up and was impacting the quality of my life. Childhood traumas that were kind of unresolved, and it was not until I had kids. I thought I had kind of handled that stuff. I was always goal driven. I was always passionate. I was always a strong community member. But I was leaning heavily. Like if you don't resolve trauma in your life as it unfolds, and you don't get help either through community, it don't have to be necessarily a professional, but you don't get community around certain things, and you sit on an island alone trying to sort out things. I mean, some of the stuff I was able to sort out, but so much is done through disassociation. So much is done through burying memories and burying trauma deep. And so for me, when I became a dad, and I had children of my own, and then those children would hit different milestones in their life, it would bring me back to that age I was and where I was at that stage, and maybe some of the heavy weight I was carrying at that stage. So through the lens of my children, I started reliving some of my childhood trauma, and it was interfering with my relationships with my kids, which I wasn't prepared to do. I would have never put the oxygen mask on myself, had the, I never thought highly enough of myself back then to take time to work on me in that way. And it wasn't until I saw it interfering with my kids that I said, I'm not going to let this happen. And, being a good dad and a present father and a present husband, and a partner that my wife could count on was super important to me. So I put the oxygen mask on me for them. And I'm glad I did, because at some point I realized that I was worth that oxygen mask too. And one of the things that when I was working with the therapist, I was saying, he said, you have a lot going on in your head. Like I unpack stuff. I've always unpacked stuff. And so as this trauma was coming back up and I was starting to relive some of this stuff, I needed to do something constructive. I was pouring alcohol over top of it. I was eating, I was ballooning up, I went up to 374 pounds. And there wasn't enough alcohol in the world to bury some of the trauma that you relive in, and it's like, and then you're trying to be a good dad. You're taking your kids to school in the morning, but you're up late. You're drinking when your family's going to bed. So for every one drink they thought I had, I probably had three or four. Because by the time I did the old switcheroo with the bottle, and I used to think that maybe it's I got a problem. My father was an alcoholic. Maybe I'm an alcoholic too. So I'd stop for a week. I'd stop for 2 weeks. And I'd say, well, yes, if I was an alcoholic, I'd never be able to stop for 2 weeks. Okay, it must be okay.
That's one of the
Yeah,
pitfalls, right?
yeah, I'd be able to hoist again, no problem. And then I would get back into that cycle, because really it wasn't a problem I had. It was a solution to a problem I had. I had this unresolved trauma. And it just served, people don't look at it this way, but it's really a outlet. It's really an outlet for things. A lot of people, it really isn't the problem. It's the solution to the problem. I really believe that. So, seeing the therapist and starting to work on myself in a deeper, more meaningful way, it was suggested that I start journaling. And it was really clumsy at first. I would write
It's hard
stuff.
to get around the discipline around it too, right?
Yeah, I would get frustrated with it. And I started with a 90-day challenge. Where I got really disciplined was in 2019 with it. And that was in a community that I was in around alcohol, and where we were encouraged to journal for 90 days straight. And so I made that commitment to do it. And I wrote every day, and it was only writing to me. It wasn't supposed to be unpacked by anybody else. And that actually, some of that stuff I've shared on Facebook, because there's, some of it was the ramblings of a madman that would go into the journal. But some of it was some really important stuff that I unpacked about myself and how I got to the place I was and how I was able to pick myself up and move forward. And the truth is, the more, I've always been a student of people, and maybe that's why I've had some success in real estate, is being a student of people and a fan of people, and knowing that there's always more to the story than people will allow you to know. All you get to know is their version of what they're comfortable sharing with you.
True.
You don't get to know. Most people have some trauma that they're carrying. Most people have,
Everybody does. Yeah.
yeah, they have things that they don't share, struggles they have, fears that they have. So I, because journaling has become so important to me, I now journal every day. I'd say it was 3.5 years ago where I said, I'm going to unpack something on Facebook every day, and I'm going to see how long I can do it.
So
And
is this every day that you put something up on Facebook
I
every day?
do something, yeah, long form on Facebook every morning. Part of my healing journey has included a sunrise routine, I call it, but
Yeah.
really it's like a 4:30 to 5 a.m. Routine that will usually get me out walking, or either at sunrise if sunrise is the time it is now, or before sunrise if it's later in the year. Yeah, when sunrise is 7 p.m. Yeah, God bless you. Then by the time the sun's up, I'm way off and going by then. But I call it my sunrise routine, and that is a journal. Part of that is a journal entry, and then a lot of times I'll take that journal entry. cut and paste it, and then I'll reformat it. I won't put it, often word for word. Sometimes I do, into Facebook, but I'll do a Facebook version of it,
Mhm.
something that I'm prepared to share. And I made the promise to be 100% honest, because I don't think there's enough
Which
honesty.
is hard to do.
Yeah, well, it's very vulnerable, especially for someone like me, because um, I've been a chameleon. I'll adjust to whatever environment I'm in, and so like people would always say, they never knew I carried so much struggle, because I always wore a mask well. And most people there are many people who wear masks in our society, and you don't know what they're carrying. And so it was, I would blend in. You would never, because I was able to blend in so much. Being able to do that was, or give the appearance of being okay. It was almost, in some ways it was a gift, in some ways it was a
Oh, the
curse.
blessing and the curse for
Yeah.
sure.
So being honest with myself and exposing myself, it's almost like, what's the old adage, standing in front of the room and, either picturing the audience naked or picturing yourself naked. You almost feel like you're standing there naked,
Yeah.
vulnerable, and for everybody to see. But it is empowering as well, because you say, look, this is just who I am. I'm
Hmm.
comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with because I'm a good man. I'm a good husband. I'm a good dad. I'm a good friend. I'm a good real estate agent. I'm a good advocate. I'm a good community member, no matter what community I exist in. These are very important things for me. And and I have these other things that I've had to unpack, and challenges that I had. And the more honest I can be about that, and about letting people know that a pathway from struggle to strength isn't always a straight line. Matter of fact, it's often not. It's usually, two steps forward, three
Yes.
steps back, up and down, zigzag around, but as long as you're committed, and my tagline at the end of most of my posts, those long posts, is always 1% better every day.
Yeah.
The hashtag I like to use. And because that's really how I've gone to view my journey, is I don't need to, you know, I don't need to reach a destination so much. I have goals,
Yeah.
very distinctive ones. I've gotten very goal motivated. Um, yeah, and those goals are very deep ones. I have 10 very deep goals that I visit regularly. And everything that I do, including my writing, has to be connected to each of those 10 goals.
Joe,
Um,
how crazy is it that we were just talking about this? Like, like we talk about in life, like it's about, people chase attainment, right? And this finish line, at this imaginary finish line that's out there that we're all moving towards. But the reality is, it's progress towards a meaningful goal is one of the pillars to happiness. And I'm going to ask you real quick, Joe. What was the term we used earlier? We are talking about struggle. Do you remember what it was? Al, the reason what we were talking about was, struggle is it a requirement? It's a human need. Struggle is a human need, and you have either that it was empowered struggle or victimized struggle. Empowered struggle is what you're doing now. Empowered struggle is the difficult things getting up early. Empowered struggle is exercising. Empowered struggle is opening yourself up to the traumas of your past, which is incredibly difficult to do, right? But you're choosing to do that. The victim struggle is the self sabotage, the drinking, the women, in some cases, very successful people who have, from the outside looking in, when they got their mask on, they got everything you think they'd ever want in the world, and they want to, they're this close to jumping off a bridge. You know what I mean? Because they're choosing that victim struggle instead of the empowered struggle. And I think it's so important for our listeners, for the people who are out there. Like, guys, you heard Al. He is not this is an accomplished, pillar of the community, and I think that a big part is a willingness to accept, like, hey, I'm going to choose empowered struggle, right? Over Joe. What was one of the things you said earlier about empowered struggle?
Well, so like, well, there always needs to be a juxtaposition to appreciate like growth or success. So if you don't have like, without joy there, without pain there can't be joy, and sunshine, rain, like that whole deal, right? So like your mind, if everything is going exactly how it should be and you are like firing on all cylinders, your mind will naturally seek out some kind of stressor. And if you can fabricate that stress in a controlled environment and do things, you get the same basic, like it's like a controlled thing.
Satisfy the need that you
Yeah,
satisfy
because
it.
if you are in control of the stimuli that is stressing you, then that's going to eliminate the ones that you can't control from creeping into your mind. And it's all literally all in your mind. Like unless someone's physically attacking you or you're physically ill or something like that, then all of these things that people like fixate on and have a hard time with, these are all components of things in their mind. So getting back, like you can control the 6 inches between your head. That's about it. So if you're able to fabricate stresses under your own terms and under your own control, then this is going to fill that need for the juxtaposition of when you feel good and you're doing good things and success and so forth. So one of the common themes that we've noticed when we've had guests and people that do amazing things in life is it seems like a lot of people who have had some sort of trauma in their life, then it triggers something in the brain, and then they go out and they do these amazing things. Like there's so many stories of, I was in war, I did this, and then I came back, and like because of that experience, I saw things differently, and then I went out and did this, or a loss of a spouse or a child or something like that. And all of these things, I don't know what it does. I'm sure that there could be scientific studies on it, but it definitely changes the DNA in people to go out to do great things. And so, like, you don't want,
Hopefully it does.
yeah,
Hopefully it
well,
does.
yeah, of course, but like, you don't want to have wait around for something bad to happen. You can actually stimulate these stressors, and whatever that neuro connection that happens, you can do it through doing difficult things every day. And so, I've personally noticed this. Like, I started training, I started fighting, and so forth, and get up early and do all these like relatively difficult things. And my mind, as I'm doing the difficult things, is not racing to the unknown of like, oh, what about this? So it's definitely, there's something to it. You need to fill the void of a stress in your life that you can control, and it'll help you appreciate and realize on the other end of the positive and the good things that you have going on, and so forth. So that's what I think the big takeaway would be.
It's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Al, I hope that you continue to share your journey with everyone. And if you're not following Al, go on Facebook and do it, because, like I said, I enjoy every day reading those posts, and there's wisdom behind it, and there's rawness to it, and it's a good reminder for me on being disciplined around the things that I want to be disciplined around, and the fact that you continue to do it is an inspiration. So I look forward to it, to many, many more.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny because you end up developing kind of a tribe there. If I turn this back to business for a second, people do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Yep.
Especially in real estate, mortgage business. It's like it's a relationship business, and it's funny because I'll see people and they'll, you know, admitting your frailty and admitting your being vulnerable, is such a strong connector to people. And it's not why I did it. I didn't do it as a business strategy.
No
Um,
more than your mom did it when she was
oh,
learning about people, right?
yeah. I just did it to in my own self development, and in the possibility that what I may have unpacked might help somebody else. It's something you mentioned about kind of the victim mentality. Um, Anytime I hear the word victim, I got to pay it some respect, because I was one of these people that I never wanted to be a victim. I wanted to be past like you know, muscle past it, whatever, grin and bear it,
Yeah.
shoulder whatever the weight. And one of the things I learned was that I needed to recognize and respect whatever, I was so hell bent on not being a victim that I think I never paid that respect that it deserved at the stage in my life when um, maybe I was in that position. So for me, actually acknowledging that I was a victim in many ways, was a big moment for me. Yeah, I sat in the pit for a brief amount of time,
Yeah.
um, and I felt it. And so you could either stay in that pit and you can continue with that, the world is out to get me, and or you can say, okay, now that I've accepted this reality, what am I going to do about it? But it was until, and I really think I was able to put my own personal self development and my ability to work through my own traumas on kind of the steroid path that it jumped into, because I did allow myself to be a victim. I never gave myself that grace before.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't an extended period, but it was a period where I still, so in still many ways, I identify as the victim. Then you identify in the next phases as well. But it's almost like, okay, this is all right. I want to sit here for a minute and acknowledge these things, these truths, and then I can figure out where to go from here. But I almost have to pay it the respect I never allowed it to have as it was unfolding. So
That's
that
a
was
great point, man. Because I guess because again, we come into this world without our choice. Like we didn't choose to be here. We didn't pick our parents. We didn't pick our circumstances for the first, what, first 20% of our lives, right? So yes, you're absolutely right. Like we are all victims. Have been victimized in some way or another. So obviously, some more severe than others, but I think the difference is: are trauma, bad things happen, accept it, like you said, process it, work through it, feel it, and let it go. I think there's people out there that victimize themselves, and I
But
think that's the victim mentality that a lot of people
there's a
refer to.
difference. I think
Yeah. Semantics are important, but it's
semantically,
nuanced.
there's a difference between victim and survivor. So, like,
yeah,
victim, you can be a victim because something happens to you. What you do at that point determines whether you're a survivor or you're
right.
not. So that's
Yeah.
that's
Right.
what I think the focus is.
But
Like,
there's
am I
there's no survivor that exists that wasn't a victim first.
correct? You
I
don't
think
choose to be.
right,
You didn't choose to be a victim,
right,
but you choose to be a survivor. That's
exactly,
the
right,
so I actually I like that you're acknowledging that because that's important that things happen to you if you're a
right,
victim. Like no one walks down the street and chooses to get mugged.
right,
Like you
right.
didn't think that was going to happen. Someone put their will on you, and then you're left with the consequences of that. And after that point, it's up to you to decide how you're going to move forward. So
But society tells us in many instances, particularly men, although women as well, that you shouldn't be a victim. You should power through it. You need to get over it. You move forward with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tough it
Muscle up.
up.
You put your big boy pants on. That kind of stuff, and that's kind of the stigmatism that comes around. So it's almost like when you give it a minute to allow that victim piece to come in your mind, it's almost like you dismiss it. At least I did. You dismiss it as this. These are not valid. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't. Somehow this makes me less of a man or less of a person. And in reality, for me, in my path, it was like, no, it was validating that same thing that I had been dismissing for as long as I was, and acknowledging its existence. And then I said,
mhm.
okay, now I can move into that kind of survivor mindset, which
Yeah,
is okay. Like I don't have to sit in this same place all the time, but I identify that way still, and I have a lot of empathy for folks who do get stuck in that victim spot, because I do know there's not a blueprint for a lot of that. And so it's some people have to sit in that mess a little bit longer before they then say, okay, now it's time to get up. And who am I to define what that length of time should be?
sure.
Especially, it's not like we have a butcher scale and we get to weigh trauma everywhere we go. But your
Right.
trauma,
Nobody can
Yeah,
compare
and
my pain to your pain.
there's
right?
different severities of it too. You
Absolutely.
know,
Have you ever read anything on the dopamatic responses to victimhood?
Yeah. I,
That's
I'm
some crazy stuff.
I'm such an I've become such a wormhole. Again, I used to listen to a ton of sports talk radio state,
Not anymore.
and I'll either tune in. I've become a huge person on Audible. Right now I'm reading. Body Keeps Score, complex. Traumas, and just things that are just interest me. One of my favorite books is a book called Unfuck Yourself, Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life, Gary John Bishop. He's got a whole series of books.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see me with my earbuds in, if I'm at the gym, if I want to walk, and I walk every day, if I'm in my car driving, I almost always have Audible on, or a guest that's on a podcast somewhere that inspires me or I want to learn more about. And it's usually subject. It's not usually mindless. Once in a while, I call that like Doritos. Like sometimes you just want to eat a
Yeah,
Dorito.
yeah,
There's no nutritional value, but it's a Dorito. And but I always want to be filling my cup up. It's almost like car university. I'm in my car. I want to learn something.
yeah.
All the time you spend. So
I
that's
like
kind of,
that. I like that term, car university.
yeah. Why not? Right? It's so I'd always
I just hope our podcast aren't Doritos. I think
no.
we're more, KJ's more like a flaming hot Cheeto.
You guys are at least a Texas Tommy or something like that. There's some
Some
protein.
nutritional
Yeah, there's
value.
some
Hey,
protein.
yeah, you know, it's,
Like as long as you don't feel guilty after listening to us, I think
No,
we're all
not at
right.
all.
it's okay. It's
Yeah,
good.
you guys bring too much goodness into the world. So that's a good thing. That's why I always like talking to Ken. No disrespect. Joe and I just don't know each other as well. So but yeah, whenever I see Ken, we usually got a smile on our face. Certain people you run into, you meet, and when you leave the meeting, you feel a little bit better. Like that's a real special thing. And there should be more people in the universe like that who you're always pouring in. And I appreciate that.
I appreciate it too. All right, speaking of appreciation, I have a massive appreciation for someone who's seen Barry Manilow 7 times. Let's get into the two truths and a lie. We have 3 facts here. One is Al can name not the occupation, but the actual name of each member of the village people. He's been to Barry Manilow 7 times, mostly with guys. I think
He said exclusively with guys.
No, he said he went once or twice with his wife or something.
Okay.
He hung out with the Sugar Hill Gang. I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm already upset at what I'm gonna find out is not true. Like you said, Joe, I want them all to be true.
Well,
Yeah.
don't sell Melly Mel short because it was the Sugar Hill Gang and Melly
Right,
Mel.
I didn't write that down.
My white lines go a long way, brother. Come on,
Joe, which one of these is the lie, man?
Bro, that's like, I mean, what, like Apache? You're all just on a bus, like jumping on it, like riding the, like white lines, bro. Man, I'm gonna have to say the lie. Like, well, first of all,
We
knowing
don't.
all the names of the village people, that's just ridiculous. Like that is like that's too specific. That's too crazy to be a lie. Like that's like I can't imagine how you would come up with that being your lie. So I'm gonna rule that one out. That's gotta be true. Barry Manilow 7 times with mostly dudes. Like there's a lot of there could be some nuances in there that aren't true. Like it could have been Barry Manilow twice with his wife, and then it's not 7.
Or could have been hanging out with a bunch of dudes at Barry Manilow show.
Could be, yeah, dude. It might have been somebody else. I don't know. So I'm gonna go with number 2 being a lie, just because I really hope the other 2 are true.
I'm gonna say number 2 as well, but the lie's Barry Manilow. I think it was Wayne Newton that he saw 7 times, and not Barry Manilow. That's gonna be my guess as well. Al, which one of these is the lie?
So I definitely hung out at the lagoon, and I definitely was on the party bus drinking zipper heads with the Sugar Hill Gang.
That is
and Melly
freaking
Mel.
awesome.
Yeah, just by chance. We didn't even know they were playing. We went there. We went there after a WWF at the Spectrum, and went there and
Yeah, was it
This is
quarter drink night?
Sugar Hill.
Yeah.
This isn't like the revival of the
Yeah, no,
early 2000s.
this was midnight. They came for a midnight show, and we
Wow.
were just getting ready to leave the lagoon. We went there, probably got there at like 10 o'clock after the WWF match. was with a couple buddies, and they said, "Oh, Sugar Hill Gang's running a little bit late, but they'll be here. Don't worry." And I was like, "Did they just say the Sugar Hill Gang? We're not going anywhere." So we stayed, and we ended up, it was a late night. I'll just leave it at that. And then and all because we wanted the tour shirts. That's how we ended up. It wasn't we were special or VIPs or anything. It was.
You remember the Lagoon had penny drinks? Remember that?
Oh yeah, the Lagoon. We spent many a night at the Lagoon. There's a reason I have so few brain cells. So and the village people, I had all the.
That was peak Essington back in the day.
Oh, I loved it. I missed it. I still walk down there. It's one of my walk. I walk by the old Lagoon. They have that Governor Prince Park down there, which is really cool. And you still see the old site where the Lagoon stood. So maybe one day we'll get something else over there. But I missed the Lagoon.
I hope not. That place needs to be like Independence Hall.
A shrine, yeah. And growing up in the 80s, we had album covers. And on album covers, on the back of the Macho Man album and the YMCA album and their Live and Sleazy album, which was a bifold, you would open it up, had all the names of all the players. So Victor Willis, Randy Jones, Alex Briley, Glenn Hughes, all these guys, the biker dude. So I knew all their names, and for some reason it occupies space in my head I've never been able to lose. I've forgotten so much shit in my life, but I've never forgotten that. So it's something I'll bring up. And then Barry Manilow is the lie. I've seen him 11 times, twice with my wife. And it wasn't 7, and 9 times with dudes I grew up with, because one day we all came in. There's 2 types of men in the world. Men who admit they like Barry Manilow, and men who are in the closet and won't admit it because they think it casts some dispersions on your manliness. But there's not a man alone who don't know the words of Mandy, so don't even deny it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
One day we were having a few drinks when we shouldn't have been, when we were in we were in high school.
Without taking. That's what happened.
That's right. And we admitted. Someone said, "Hey, I kind of like Barry Manilow." And next thing I know, Manilow's on the radio because we all came out of the closet and said, "Me too, me too." So it was the original Me Too movement back in circa 1987 or whatever. And it was that Me Too. I love Barry Manilow. And so every time we've seen him, we've tailgated. We've had it was like going to an Eagles game. So all these dudes would walk by with their wives or their girlfriends looking at us like something ain't right here. These guys are like throwing the football around, got steaks on the grill. What's going on here? This is the Eagles environment. And we were going to see Manilow. And twice I went with my wife. He did a Christmas show once. And then we went to one of the shows, and it was a real good time. It's a real good concert, by the way. If you ever get a chance to see,
I'm a fan. I love Barry Manilow. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
So, which are you, Ken? You still in the closet, or you real deal?
Listen, I sing I sing the songs when they come on the radio. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to.
That's good. You're a real man when you're at the gym and you got the buds in and you got Manilow playing, and you can look around the room and you see everyone else with the earbuds in, and you can say, I guarantee I'm the only guy.
It's funny.
I'm the only guy here, but he's got a cadence to his music and a lot of his songs. That's good workout music. Give it a shot next time.
It's funny you say that, because when I work out, I listen. That's one of my secrets. When I work out a lot every day, and when I'm lifting and stuff like that, I have Whitney Houston. I listen to like yacht rock, like all this stuff, and I swear to God, everyone probably. I love Stevie Wonder. I see Neil Diamond in concert a bunch too. I love Neil Diamond, but I know I live
in blue jeans, baby. Come on,
yeah,
I got you.
That's the best music to work out to. I don't need to get fired up. I'm already fired up. I need to be to let the music talk to me.
You just got to unplug. That's it.
There we go. All right. Well, listen, we got to wrap up. This was probably one of our longest podcasts, and it went by like flash.
It's like one of my Facebook posts. Long.
Yeah, exactly. I should have known it wasn't going to be short. But I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for sharing, man. I hope you come back, and I hope we can catch up soon.
Yeah, man.
And we'll see you guys later.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Selling the Dream. We know you don't want to miss a single episode, so go subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts. And then make sure to share the show with your friends and leave us a review.